Have you ever wondered what ancient secrets lie hidden beneath the dust of forgotten libraries? Picture this, a lone scholar, her fingers trembling as they brush against the cracked leather of an ancient tome, its pages humming with whispers of a time when celestial beings walked the earth. This is where our story begins, with Alara, a seeker of truths, buried deep in the ruins of a library, lost to time. As she traces the faded ink, she uncovers the first threads of a mystery that will lead her, and all of us, into the heart of Middle-earth's divine Pantheon, the Valar and Maiar. These are the beings who shape the world, whose power echoes in every mountain and river, yet whose presence now feels like a fading echo. Where are you joining us from tonight? And what hour has drawn you into this tale of gods and prophecy? Let us know in the comments. We'd love to imagine you there, lantern in hand, as we step into this journey together. The tome Elara holds is no ordinary book. Its pages pulse with a language older than kingdoms, telling of a time when the Valor, the great guardians of Middle-earth, walked among mortals, their light shaping the very fabric of the land. The Maiar, their lesser but equally wondrous servants, danced in the shadows of their glory, weaving magic into the world. But now, something is amiss. The prophecy Elara deciphers speaks of a celestial disturbance, a quiet unraveling of the divine order. Why are the Valor retreating? What force could dim the light of beings so mighty? The answers lie scattered, hidden in ruins, etched into starlit stones, waiting for someone bold enough to piece them together. This is more than a story of gods and their deeds. It's an invitation to step into a world where the boundaries between myth and reality blur, where every whisper of wind might carry the voice of a Maia, and every shadow could hide the gaze of a Vala. As we follow Elara's quest, we'll uncover the roles these celestial beings played in Middle-earth's creation, their struggles, their triumphs, and the quiet tragedy of their fading presence. So settle in, wherever you are, and let the flicker of your screen become the glow of a lantern in the dark. The secrets of the Valar and Maiar await, and who knows? By the end, you might just feel their presence stirring in the air around you. The path to wisdom is rarely smooth, and for Alara, it leads to the shores of a forgotten harbor where the ancient Lormaster Thuron dwells. His home is built from the bones of ships that once sailed to Valinor, their timbers whispering of ages when mortals could still glimpse the undying lands. When she finds him beneath the silver branches of a malorn tree, his eyes hold the weight of centuries, and a warning: the Valor do not take kindly to those who pry into their affairs. He murmurs, his voice like the sigh of receding tides. Their works are beyond mortal understanding, and their wrath is swift as the storm. But Alara's fingers tighten around the prophecy, its words burning in her mind like embers. She cannot turn back now. The Lormaster sees the fire in her gaze and sighs. He speaks of the last mortals who sought Valinor, their fates lost to the mist. Yet even as he warns her, his hands move, unrolling a brittle map, its edges frayed with time. If you must go, he says, tracing a route no living soul has sailed in an age, the winds will not guide you. The seas will resist, and the shadows will watch. His words settle like a chill, but Alara knows the truth. The prophecy is not just a riddle to solve. It is a plea. Something has shifted in the unseen realms. a discord in the song of the Valor that even the May are no longer understand. As she gathers supplies a cloak woven from elven twilight, a vial of water from the mirror of Galadriel, the air grows heavy. Whispers coil at the edges of her hearing, not in words but in presence. The Maiar are near. Some, like the gentle spirits of river and breeze, may still aid the children of Middle-earth. Others, twisted by ancient strife, now linger in the dark places, their loyalty frayed. They sense her purpose. They always do. And as the first star pierces the evening sky, Alara steps onto a boat that should not float, its sails sewn from dreams. The journey to Valinor is forbidden, but the shadows stirring behind the veil, they are far older than any law. The sea beneath Alara's ship does not move as water should. It heaves like a living thing, its waves cresting with unnatural silence, as if the ocean itself is holding its breath. Nights blur into days under a sky too full of stars, their light pressing down like eyes watching from the void. And then the dreams begin. Manwë, Lord of the Valor, appears to her not as a king enthroned in glory, but as a figure of storm and sighing wind, his voice woven through the groaning timbers of the ship. You tread where even the brave falter, he whispers, and the words leave frost on her skin. Beside him, Varda, star kindler, stretches out a hand not in blessing, but in warning. The shadows pooling in her palm are not the absence of light, but something older, a darkness that remembers the first discord in the song of creation. The crew murmurs of ill omens, salt crusts their lips no matter how much they drink, and the sails hang limp even when the wind howls. A young sailor from Gondor clutches a pendant of the white tree, his knuckles white. The sea knows we don't belong here, he mutters. Alara wants to reassure him, but the prophecy burns hotter in her thoughts. It spoke of a rift, a tear in the veil that separates the mortal world from the realm of the Valor. What if their journey isn't forbidden, but expected? What if the resistance they face isn't a barrier, but a test? Then comes the night the stars go out. Not a cloud obscures them, they simply vanish, as if a hand has swept across the heavens. In that blackness, Alara hears it, a note low and discordant, vibrating through the ship's hull. It is the sound of something unraveling. The Maiar who guide winds and waves fall silent. The sea turns thick as oil, and in the suffocating dark, Alara understands the true weight of her quest. This is not about uncovering secrets. It is about mending what has been broken. The Valor do not speak to mortals without reason. Their warnings are not for her ears alone, but for all of Middle-earth. The forgotten darkness does not rise from the depths. It wakes because the world has grown too quiet, because the songs of the Valar and Maiar have faded into echoes. And if their light vanishes entirely, what then will stand between the world and the night? The dawn comes, but the stars do not return. The crew gathers on deck, their faces gaunt in the pallid light. No one speaks of turning back. Perhaps they, too, feel it, the pull of something greater than fear. Alara traces the edge of her frayed map, the path to Valinor now a line of fire in her mind. The sea may resist, the shadows may watch, but the silence of the Valor is not indifference. It is a call, and she will answer it, even if the sky itself refuses to light her way. The shores of Valinor are not golden, as the songs promised. The sand beneath Alara's boots is pale as ash, the air thick with the scent of salt, and something older, like the memory of rain after a long drought. Above her, the once glorious two trees stand as husks, their light reduced to a faint shimmer, barely enough to cast shadows. This is not the undying lands of legend. This is a place caught between waking and fading, where even the waves seem to hesitate before breaking against the shore. And then, through the haze, a figure emerges, tall, cloaked in silver gray, his presence both majestic and weary. Eönwë, Herald of Manwë, his wings folded like banners after a battle no one remembers fighting. His voice is softer than she imagined, yet it carries the weight of anvils. "You should not have come, child of dust," he says, but there's no anger in it, only sorrow. "The Maiar who once sang in these halls are scattered," he tells her, some clinging to fragments of their purpose, others lost to whispers in the dark. The Valor have not abandoned Middle-earth out of indifference, but necessity. Something has reached into the foundations of their power, unraveling threads of the world's song. And without them, the balance falters, shadows grow teeth. Mortals feel it as unease, as dreams of falling skies. But here, in the heart of the divine, it is a wound that will not close. Alara expects a command to turn back, to carry word of this decay to her kin. Instead, Eönwë kneels, his hand hovering above the sand. Where his fingers almost touch, the grains stir, forming shapes, mountains crumbling, rivers running backward, stars winking out one by one. "You were led here," he murmurs, "not by chance, but because the world still whispers to those who listen." The task he offers is not a quest for glory. It is a digging into the roots of things to find what gnaws at them. The answer lies not in Valinor, but in the echoes between worlds, in places where the music of creation once thrummed unbroken. As he speaks, the ground trembles not with earthquake, but with something subtler, as if the land itself is exhaling. Eönwë's eyes flicker with something like fear. "Even now, the shadows listen," he warns. "They were once Maiar too." The admission hangs between them, a truth too heavy to voice outright. The enemy they seek is not some outer darkness. It is a mirror, a shattered reflection of the divine, and it knows her name. The wind shifts, carrying the scent of petrichor and decay. Somewhere beyond the dim glow of the trees, a sound thrums, low, insistent, the heartbeat of something vast and waking. Eönwë presses a shard of crystal into her palm, cool as moonlight. "This will guide you where my kind cannot walk," he says. Inside its depths, a tiny flame flickers, not with heat, but with the cadence of a voice. It is the last echo of Avala's song, her compass, her lifeline, and as the first true night falls over Valinor, Elara realizes the cruelest truth of all. The gods did not leave the world to its fate. They are trapped in theirs. The path to the Halls of Mandos is not marked by signs or worn by footsteps. It winds through valleys where the air hums with half-remembered names, where every stone seems to murmur secrets in a language just beyond understanding. Elara's breath fogs in the unnatural chill, her fingers tightening around the crystal shard Eönwë gave her. Its faint pulse quickens as she nears the great iron doors, their surfaces etched with runes that twist when she tries to read them. This is a place outside time, where the echoes of the dead linger like smoke, and the walls themselves seem to lean closer, listening. Inside, the silence is vast, but not empty. It thrums with the weight of countless souls waiting beyond the veil. their whispers threading through the air like spider silk. The halls stretch endlessly, their arches carved with scenes of lost battles and broken oaths, and between them drift the Maiar, who serve Mandos spirits of judgment and memory, their faces hidden beneath hoods of starlit shadow. One glides toward her, its voice the rasp of parchment unfolding. You seek answers, it says, not a question, but an acknowledgement. But the dead do not speak plainly. They show. The vision comes without warning. One moment, Alara stands in the echoing dark. The next, she is drowning in memory. She sees a Maia of Allah's forge, once radiant with the fire of creation, now hunched in a cavern deep beneath the earth. Its hands, once skilled in shaping mountains, now claw at the walls, etching sigils that bleed black smoke. The air reeks of molten metal and something fouler corruption, a sickness woven into the very song of its being. And then, the realization, this is no random fall from grace. This was a choice. The Maia's whispers slithered into the ears of others, turning loyalty to doubt, harmony to dissonance. It did not merely fall, it pulled. The vision fractures, leaving Alara gasping on the cold floor. The hooded Maiar gather around her, their silence heavy with something like pity. You see now, murmurs one, the rift was not born of neglect, it was carved. The betrayal runs deeper than a single rogue spirit. This Maia, once a keeper of Allah's secrets, found a crack in the world's song, a flaw in the music of creation, and pressed its fingers into the wound. Every whispered doubt, every act of defiance among the Maiar, every retreat of the Valor, all threads leading back to that dark cavern. But the dead do not only show the past. Another vision grips her, a great loom. It threads the fates of mortals and gods alike. One strand, blackened and fraying, tugs at the rest, threatening to unravel the whole. The loom's guardian, a Maia with eyes like smoldering embers, strains to hold it together, but the corrupted thread pulses like a living thing. It is not just breaking. It is calling, and somewhere in the depths of the world, something is answering. Elara staggers back, the crystal shard burning in her palm. The Halls of Mandos have given their warning, but the truth is heavier than she imagined. This is not just a struggle to reclaim what was lost. It is a race against a decay that has already taken root. The fallen Maia is not hiding, it is waiting. And the longer the Valor remain divided, the stronger its call becomes. The whispers of the dead fade behind her as she steps back into the world of the living, but their message lingers like a brand. To mend the rift, she must find the source of the corruption before the last threads snap. The shadows are not just watching, they are counting down. The cavern is alive with whispers, the walls slick with something darker than shadow. Alara's footsteps echo unnaturally, as if the stone itself is swallowing sound. Ahead, the rogue Maia waits, not hunched and broken, as in her vision, but coiled like a predator, its form shifting between molten gold and searing black. Little seeker, it croons, its voice honeyed with mock pity. You carry their shard like a beggar clutching crumbs. They give you scraps of light, while I could show you the forge where stars are born. Its fingers uncurl, revealing a flame that dances not with heat, but with the raw, unfiltered music of creation. For a heartbeat, Alara forgets to breathe. The offer hangs between them, thick as smoke. With that flame, she could unravel the mysteries of the Valor, bend the fabric of the world to her will. No more chasing fragments of prophecy. No more begging for answers from gods who hide. The Maia's smile widens, its teeth glinting like shards of obsidian. You feel it, don't you, the hunger to know. They fear what mortals might become if they truly understood. The flame pulses, casting jagged light across the cavern, and for a dizzying moment, Alara sees herself reflected in it. Not as she is, but as she could be, a figure of storm and starlight, her hands shaping destinies. Her fingers tremble toward the fire, then a sound, faint but unmistakable. The crystal shard at her wrist hums, its tiny light flaring like a heartbeat. Eönwë's voice whispers through it, not in words, but in the memory of wind over snow-capped peaks, of dawn breaking after endless night. The contrast is jarring. The Maia's flame promises power, but the shard offers only a single, fragile truth. The light she seeks was never meant to be owned. It was meant to be shared. She wrenches her hand back. The Maia's face contorts, its molten edges hardening into something jagged and cruel. Fool, it snarls. You cling to their lies even as they fade. The flame in its palm gutters, replaced by a creeping darkness that slithers across the stone toward her. Alara stumbles back, but not fast enough. The shadow licks at her boot, then climbs, seeping through leather and skin like ink through parchment. Cold floods her veins, and suddenly, the cavern is gone. She stands in a void, surrounded by fractured mirrors, each reflecting a different Alara. One kneels before the Valor, broken. Another rules over ruins, her eyes hollow with power. A third dissolves into smoke, her screams silent. The real Alara gasps, collapsing to her knees as the vision shatters. The shadow now coils around her wrist, a living brand where the crystal once glowed. The Maia looms over her, its voice dripping with false sympathy. Too late to turn back, little seeker. You've tasted the dark now. It will always find you. With a laugh like cracking ice, it dissolves, leaving her alone in the trembling dark. The mark pulses, a whisper at the edge of her thoughts. Not words, but intent. A hunger to show her more, to peel back every layer of the world until nothing is hidden. Alara clutches her wrist, but the shadow doesn't burn. It thrums, a second heartbeat in time with her own. She came seeking answers. Now, the answer seeks her, and it is not the one she hoped to find. The Valor's light is fading, because the dark is not just rising. It is learning, and it has just chosen its newest student. Fleeing the Halls of Mandos, Alara stumbles into a world of mist and murmuring leaves. The Gardens of Lórien unfold around her like a half-remembered dream. Silver willows weeping into mirrored pools, flowers that bloom and fade in the span of a single breath. The air hums with the scent of lavender and something deeper, older, the musk of forgotten stories. And there, beneath an ancient cypress, sits Ermo, Vala of dreams, his form shifting like smoke in moonlight. He does not rise to greet her. He does not need to. His presence alone is a balm, pressing gently against the ache of the shadow coiled around her wrist. You carry a heavy thing, he murmurs, his voice the echo of a lullaby. Not all darkness is meant to be shed. Some must be understood. A cup appears in his hands, brimming with liquid starlight. She drinks, and the gardens dissolve. Suddenly, she is standing in her childhood home, watching her younger self trace maps of imaginary lands on the floor. The memory is warm, sweet until the shadow at her wrist twitches. The young Alara looks up, her eyes black as the void. "You were always too curious," the child whispers, and the walls begin to bleed. Urmo's hand brushes her shoulder, and the vision shatters. "The shadow feeds on fear," he says, guiding her to the edge of a pool. Its surface shows not her reflection, but a place beyond the edges of the world, a yawning abyss where the stars themselves seem to fray like torn fabric. The void is not empty. It remembers the first note sung out of tune, the moment the music fractured. His fingers tighten around hers. To cleanse the dark within, you must walk where it began. Alara's breath catches. The void is not a place mortals can tread and return unchanged. Even the Valor seldom speak of it, but the shadow pulses hungrily. Its whispers now a chorus. You want to see. You want to know. Urmo's gaze holds hers, not with pity, but with a quiet certainty. The choice is yours, but remember, fear is not your enemy. It is the key you carry. A path materializes before her, lined with flowers that wilt as she passes. The air grows thin, the colors leaching from the world, until only gray remains. Behind her, Urmo's voice lingers like the last note of a fading song. When you reach the edge, do not close your eyes. The void gives no second chances. The ground beneath her feet crumbles into mist, and for a heartbeat, she is falling. Then silence, not the absence of sound, but the weight of it, pressing against her skin like a living thing. The shadow on her wrist flares to life, not in pain, but in recognition. It is home, and then the whispers begin, not in words, but in vibrations that shudder through her bones. The echoes of a song older than time, twisted into something raw and ravenous. This is where the first discord was sown. This is where her fear waits. The shadow unspools from her wrist, weaving into the dark like ink and water, and suddenly she understands Urmo's warning. The void does not show you nightmares, it shows you truth, and the truth is this. The rift in the world's song was never an accident, it was an invitation. Somewhere in the abyss, something stirs, not the fallen Maia, not the Valor, something that has been waiting, patient as a spider in a web, for a mortal fool enough to listen. The shadow slithers back to her, heavier now, humming with a new, terrible awareness. It does not speak. It does not need to. The choice has always been hers. To turn back would be to live with the whispers forever. To step forward, that would be to meet the composer of the discord face to face. The windless air stirs, carrying the scent of ozone and something sweetly rotten. The void is not a place, it is a throat, and it is opening. The path of the dead is not a road of stone and earth, but of memory and regret. Alara feels it the moment she steps onto its winding trail, the air thick with whispers of elves who fell long before the first sunrise, their voices woven into the wind like threads of sorrow. Olorin, his face grim beneath the shadow of his hood, does not offer comfort. They will show you what you fear most, he warns, his staff casting flickering light over the jagged cliffs. Not as illusion, but as truth. The words settle like ice in her chest, but there is no turning back, not when the shadow on her wrist pulses in time with the distant wailing of the dead. The first spirit appears as a figure of silver mist, its eyes hollow yet knowing. It does not speak. Instead, it presses a skeletal hand to Alara's forehead, and suddenly she is drowning in visions, not of her own fears, but of the world unraveling. Cities crumble into dust, Forests wither to ash, the Valor, their light dim to embers, turn their faces away, their voices silent as Middle-earth gasps its last breath. The vision shifts, and she sees herself standing at the edge of the abyss, the shadow on her wrist, grown into a serpent that coils around her throat. This is what waits, the spirit murmurs without moving its lips, the price of your curiosity. Olorin's grip on her shoulder yanks her back to the present. Do not linger in their gifts, he growls, his usual warmth replaced by steel. The dead see all possible ends, but they do not see you. His words are a lifeline, yet the next spirit is already gliding forward. A maiden with eyes like shattered glass, her once radiant armor now rusted with time. She offers no vision, only a question, her voice the scrape of a dagger being drawn. Would you die to save those who will never know your name? The shadow at Alara's wrist writhes, as if eager for her answer. The path narrows, the cliffs pressing closer until the sky is a sliver of bruised twilight. The air reeks of damp earth and something older, the scent of battles fought and lost, of oaths broken beneath the weight of centuries. Olorin's steps grow heavier, his breath labored. Even I am not welcome here, he admits, the first crack in his resolve. The dead remember the Maiar who failed them. A gust of wind howls through the pass, carrying with it the sound of 1,000 voices, rising in accusation. The spirits do not blame Alara. They blame the gods who left them to fade. Then comes the trial she could never prepare for. A figure steps from the shadows, not a spirit, but a reflection. Herself, as she might have been, unmarked by shadow, untouched by prophecy, living a simple life where the only light she needed was a hearth fire. The reflection smiles, and the ache in Alara's chest is unbearable. You could still choose this, it whispers, reaching out. Leave the gods to their silence. For a heartbeat, the temptation is crushing, but the shadow on her wrist flares, searing her skin not in pain, but in defiance. It is not the darkness that rejects this path. It is her. Olorin's staff slams down, shattering the illusion. Enough, he booms, his voice shaking the cliffs. The spirits recoil, their whispers dissolving into the wind. For the first time, the old wizard looks at Alara not as a guide, but as an equal. They have shown you the weight of your choice. Now you must show them the strength of it. The path ahead trembles, the very air vibrating with anticipation. The dead are listening, the Valor are waiting, and the shadow on her wrist, it is no longer a curse. It is a compass, pointing her toward the one truth that matters. The fate of the divine is not written in the stars. It is written in the hands of those brave enough to reach for them. At the edge of the void, the air itself feels like shattered glass, sharp, unstable, whispering warnings with every breath. The fallen Maia stands before Alara, no longer cloaked in molten gold, but in something far more terrible, the absence of light, a silhouette cut from the fabric of the abyss. Its voice is not a sound but a vibration, a tremor in her bones. You know me now, it murmurs, and the words unravel into echoes of a name she once heard in the oldest tales, Eärendil, the Star Kindler's herald, who knelt before man, why an age is past, his wings radiant with dawn. But the being before her is a grotesque mockery of that memory, its wings tattered, its eyes hollow pits where stars once burned. The Maia's offer slithers into her mind, not as speech but as sensation, a vision of power so vast it makes her knees buckle. She sees herself standing atop the ruins of Valinor, The Valor's thrones shattered at her feet, the Maiar bowing to her will. They left us to wither, the Maia hisses. They buried their mistakes in silence, but you could remake the song. Its fingers stretched toward her, not to strike but to caress, each touch leaving a trail of cold fire on her skin. The shadow on her wrist throbs in recognition, its whispers merging with the Maia's. It would be so easy to say yes, to let the rage of the abandoned fill her lungs. But then, a flicker, not from the crystal shard, now dull and lifeless at her belt, but from something deeper, a memory, her mother's hands guiding hers as a child, tracing constellations on parchment. Even the darkest night needs stars, she'd said. The Maia's offer curdles in the air as Alara straightens. You didn't fall, she says, her voice steady. You let go, the words strike like a hammer. The Maiar recoils, its form rippling with something raw, not anger but shame. The void trembles, shadows surge like a tide, but Alara doesn't flinch. She lifts her hands not in surrender, but in defiance. The names of the Valor are forbidden here, their power muted by the abyss, yet she speaks them anyway. Varda, she breathes, and the syllable is a spark in the dark. The Maia shrieks, its body contorting, as the first light pierces the void, not the blinding glare of the sun, but the soft, stubborn glow of a single star. It is enough. The shadow on her wrist burns away, not in pain, but in release. The Maia's scream fades into the howl of a wind that hasn't blown in millennia, and then silence. Not the silence of absence, but of a breath held too long, finally exhaled. The void is still. The path behind her is gone. Ahead, only the faintest glimmer remains, a thread of silver in the dark. Elara knows what it is without touching it, the last note of the world's song, waiting to be sung again. The Maia was wrong about one thing. The light was never hers to take. It was always hers to carry. The air over Middle-earth tastes different when Alara returns, not the crisp bite of victory, but the heavy stillness after a storm has passed. The rogue Maia is gone, its discord silenced, yet the silence left behind is not peace. It is the hush of a wound still healing. As she walks the familiar paths of the Shire, the grass beneath her feet feels softer, as if the earth itself remembers the weight of her journey. The hobbits laugh and feast, unaware of how close their world came to unraveling, and for the first time, Alara understands the Valor's sorrow. Their absence was never abandonment. It was the grief of watching children play on the edge of a cliff, knowing no warning could make them see the drop. At the gray havens, Círdan waits, his ancient eyes reflecting the last light of the setting sun. He does not ask for her tale. He already knows. The Valor weep. He murmurs, his voice rough as tide-worn stone, not for their own power, but for every note of the song that was lost. The admission hangs between them, fragile as a spider's web. The divine did not retreat out of anger or indifference. They stepped back because their presence, their very light, had become a weight too heavy for a world already bending under shadows. Elara kneels at the water's edge, letting the salt spray sting her cheeks. The crystal shard is gone, dissolved into the void with the last of the Maia's corruption, but its echo lingers not as a whisper, but as a question. What does it mean to rebuild a bridge when one side fears to cross it? The answer comes not in words, but in the quiet certainty of her hands as they gather driftwood. She does not carve runes of power or weave spells into the grain. She builds a simple pyre, lighting it with flint and stubborn hope. The flames rise, not as a summons, but as an offering. A reminder. The next morning, a child finds her on the shore, drawn by the scent of smoke and sea. "Were you talking to the stars?" the boy asks, his voice bright with curiosity. Elara smiles, brushing sand from his sleeve. "No," she says, "I was listening." And in that moment she feels it, the faintest brush of wind, warm as a sigh, carrying the scent of blossoms from a land beyond the sea. The Valor do not return, but they are not gone. In the years that follow, the pyre becomes a beacon, not for gods, but for mortals, travelers, scholars, dreamers who come to stand at the edge of the water and whisper their own questions into the dark. Some leave gifts, a shell, a song, a lock of hair tied with ribbon. Others simply sit in silence, their faces turned westward. Elara watches them all, her heart lighter than it has been in ages. The bridge is not built of stone or spell, but of small, stubborn acts of faith. And sometimes, when the night is clear and the waves are calm, the stars seem to burn just a little brighter. The sanctuary rises slowly, stone by stone, on the cliffs above the gray havens. Alara calls it La Menorah, the Hall of Echoes, and though its walls are built by mortal hands, its foundation is something older, the collective yearning of those who refuse to let the divine fade into myth. Scholars arrive first, their satchels stuffed with crumbling scrolls and fragments of prophecy. Then come the poets, the healers, even a handful of dwarven lore keepers who sing as they carve the names of the Valor into the great oak doors. By the time the first fire is lit in the central hearth, the air hums with a quiet energy, as if the very stones remember the touch of the Ainur. But knowledge is not always a comfort. Late one evening, as Alara pores over a manuscript detailing the song of creation, a traveling minstrel from Gondor presses a scrap of parchment into her hand. The ink is fresh, the handwriting hurried. The shadows in the east do not sleep. They walk in the skins of men. The minstrel refuses to say more, his eyes darting to the windows as if expecting claws to rake the glass. That night, Alara climbs to the sanctuary's highest tower, where the wind carries scents from lands beyond mortal maps. The stars still shine, yet something flickers at the edges of her vision. Not darkness, but a distortion, like heat rising from desert sands. The next morning, a bundle arrives from Rivendell, wrapped in elven silk and sealed with the mark of Elrond. Inside lies a mirror shard, its surface blackened yet still reflecting fragments of light. When Alara tilts it toward the sun, the glass reveals not her face, but a figure robed in storm clouds, standing at the mouth of a cavern where the walls weep blood. The image lasts only a heartbeat before fading, but the message is clear. The fallen Maia was not alone. Others, older and hungrier, have woken to the scent of a world unguarded. La Menorah's scholars debate in hushed tones. Some argue for sending word to the remaining elven strongholds. Others insist the Valor must be summoned, though none know how. Elara listens, her fingers tracing the scar on her wrist where the shadow once coiled. The truth settles over her like a weight. This sanctuary was never meant to be a haven. It is a beacon, and beacons do more than guide the lost, they draw the unseen. The first attack comes not with fire or blade, but with silence. One by one, the sanctuary's torches gutter out, though no wind blows. The hearth's embers darken to ash in an instant. In the perfect blackness, a voice slithers through the air, not the ragged hiss of the fallen Maia, but a sound like ice cracking over deep water. You gather their stories like trinkets. It murmurs, but who will remember yours? Then, as suddenly as it came, the presence vanishes. The fires relight themselves. The scholars stir from their trances, unaware anything happened at all. Only Alara stands frozen, her hands clenched around the mirror shard. The glass is warm now, almost feverish, and within its depths, a new image forms, a host of figures, cloaked in twilight, their faces hidden but their intent unmistakable. They are not coming, they are here, and they do not seek to destroy the sanctuary. They seek to use it, to twist its purpose, to turn its light into a weapon against the very gods it honors. Dawn breaks over Lormaster, painting its towers in gold. The scholars resume their work, transcribing tales of Ulmo's mercy and Yavanna's grace. But Alara slips away to the cliffs, where the salt spray stings her cheeks and the horizon stretches endless. The sanctuary was her answer to the Valor's silence. Now, she realizes, the silence was never the problem. It was the calm before the storm. Somewhere beyond the edge of the world, the music of creation stutters. And the shadows, they are not just stirring, they are singing back. Years have woven silver into Alara's hair and etched the weight of wisdom into her hands, yet the fire in her eyes burns undimmed. Lormaster thrives under her guidance, its halls echoing with the murmured prayers of pilgrims and the scratch of quills, recording half-remembered hymns to the Valor. It is here, amid the scent of parchment and candle wax, that Oloran finds her once more, not as the weary traveler she first met, but as a figure whose presence bends the very light around him. His robes are gray no longer, but white as the crest of a breaking wave, and in his eyes flickers a knowing that makes her bones ache. The shadows in the east have teeth now, he says without preamble, his voice too soft for the words it carries. They do not creep, they march. The map he unfurls across her desk is not ink on parchment, but living memory, a vision of smoke-choked valleys and skies, choked with winged horrors, their forms shifting between wolf and wraith. This is no ragtag band of corrupted Maiar. This is an army, its ranks swelling with creatures torn from the darkest verses of creation's song. They remember the old discord. Oloran murmurs, tracing a fissure in the map that leaks something darker than shadow. And they mean to finish it. The admission hangs between them, a blade balanced on its point. The Valor's absence was once a mercy. Now it is a vulnerability. Elara's fingers hover over the scar on her wrist, long healed, but never forgotten. To summon the Valor is to invite thunder into a world of kindling. Their power is not gentle, not anymore, not after centuries of watching their works unravel. What if they come as judges, not saviors? She asks, the words ash in her throat. Oloran's silence is answer enough. The Valor have every right to rage against a world that let their light gutter. Yet when she looks eastward, beyond the sanctuary's walls, she sees the truth. This is not just Middle-earth's doom. It is the unraveling of everything the Valor once sang into being. A child's laughter floats up from the courtyard, bright and unburdened. It is this, more than Oloran's dire warnings, that steels her resolve. She crosses to the great obsidian basin at the hall's center, a relic of Numenor, said to hold the tears of Ulmo. Into its depths she casts not water, but light, the last shard of the crystal Aeron. gave her, now dull but still humming with the echo of divine song. The moment it touches the basin, the air splits, not with sound, but with absence, a vacuum that pulls the breath from her lungs. Above Lormaster, the clouds part in a perfect circle, revealing a sky too blue, too vast, as if the firmament itself has drawn back in anticipation. Alaran grips her shoulder, his fingers trembling. "They will answer," he says, though his voice lacks certainty. "But the cost," Alara shakes her head. "The cost was written long ago, in the moment the first Maia chose to twist the music. The Valor's return will not be a homecoming, it will be a reckoning." As the first note of a forgotten hymn shivers through the stones beneath her feet, she understands the cruel irony. To save the world, she may have to surrender it. The shadows in the east are not the true enemy. They are the bait and the trap. It has been waiting since the dawn of time. The ancient pages crumble beneath Alara's fingertips as she traces the faded script, each word burning itself into her mind like a brand. The ritual is simple in its cruelty, a summoning carved not in runes or chanted in verse, but in sacrifice. To call the Valor back from their self-imposed exile, the summoner must become a conduit, a vessel carved hollow to hold divine fire. The text does not mince words. The spirit that opens the door cannot close it again. She exhales, her breath stirring dust motes that dance in the lamplight like tiny, frantic ghosts. Around her, Lormaster's scholars murmur over their own scrolls, unaware of the precipice she stands upon. The weight of the choice presses down, not as fear, but as a terrible clarity. Middle-earth teeters on the edge of an abyss. Yes, but this, to offer up a piece of her very self, to let the Valor's power wear her soul thin as parchment, until nothing remains but the imprint of their will. Her hands tremble, not with hesitation, but with the visceral memory of the void's hunger, the way it had whispered promises of power in exchange for surrender. This is different. This is willing. A child's voice drifts up from the courtyard, singing a nonsense rhyme about stars and silver fish. The sweetness of it is a knife to the heart. Elara closes her eyes, and suddenly she is not in the sanctuary, but on the shores of the gray havens again, watching the pyre's light dance on the waves. You carry their shard like a beggar clutching crumbs. The fallen Maia had sneered, but the truth is simpler. Light is not meant to be hoarded. It is meant to be spent. The decision crystallizes without fanfare. She reaches for the obsidian dagger resting beside the tome, a relic from Númenor's last king, its edge still sharp enough to draw blood from the air itself. The blade bites her palm without resistance, and the pain is clean, almost sweet. Crimson pools in her cupped hand, but instead of dripping, it hovers, shimmering with an inner radiance. The ritual requires no incantation. The offering itself is the prayer. As her blood rises in a slow spiral toward the ceiling, the air in the chamber thickens, pressing against her skin like the charged silence before a storm. The scholar's voice is cut off mid-sentence. The candles gutter out, and then sound. Not a voice, not music, but the raw, unfiltered note of creation itself, vibrating through her bones until her teeth ache with it. The walls of Lormaster dissolve into swirling mist, and for a heartbeat, Alara sees beyond the veil, towering figures wreathed in storm and starlight, their eyes fixed not on her, but on the fissure in the east, where the shadows mass like rot in a wound. Then the vision fractures. The chamber snaps back into focus, but the air still hums with power. Her blood hangs suspended, no longer red but gold, a single droplet burning with the light of the two trees. The cost is paid, the door is open, and as the first true wind in centuries rushes through the sanctuary's halls, carrying the scent of salt and ozone from a shore no mortal can see, Alara understands the cruelest truth of all. The Valor are coming, but they are not coming for her. They are coming through her, and the piece of herself she offered. It was never the price, it was the key. The candles flicker violently as the first gust of unnatural wind tears through Lormanora's inner sanctum. Alara barely has time to register the scent of charred parchment before the stained glass windows shatter inward, scattering shards like frozen rain. Shadows pool in the corners, not as absence, but as presence thickening into figures with eyes like smoldering coals. They move with the precision of hunters who have stalked this moment for centuries. The ritual dagger slips from Alara's grip as she staggers back, her blood still hovering midair, its golden glow painting the attackers in grotesque relief. These are no mere servants of the dark. They wear the faces of men and elves, but their smiles split too wide, revealing rows of teeth filed to points. Thuron, the young scribe who'd spent nights transcribing her every word, throws himself between her and the nearest assailant. His ink-stained hands clutch nothing but a brass candlestick, yet he swings it with the desperation of a soldier holding the last line. The creature bats it aside like a twig, but Thuron doesn't flinch. Finish it, he snarls, shoving Alara toward the obsidian basin. The command costs him. A blade sheathed in black flame punches through his ribs, and the smell of burning flesh floods the chamber. Time fractures. Alara catches Thuron as he falls, his weight sudden and terrible in her arms. His blood seeps into her robes, warm as spilled tea, but his fingers claw at her sleeve with shocking strength. They're afraid. He gasps, each word a wet struggle. That's why they came. His gaze flicks to the hovering droplet of her blood, now pulsing like a miniature star. The attackers hesitate just for a heartbeat as its light washes over them. Thuron's lips twist into something like triumph. See, they fear you. The shadows rally, lunging forward with a chorus of clicks and hisses. But Thuron's last act is to fling his body sideways, knocking the obsidian basin into their path. It cracks open like an egg, releasing a shockwave of salt-scented, mist-almost tears, unleashed after millennia. The nearest assailant screams as the brine touches its skin, the sound cut short as its form dissolves into foaming sludge. The others recoil, giving Alara the sliver of space she needs. She doesn't hesitate. Driving the ritual dagger deep into her own wounded palm, she lets fresh blood mingle with the golden droplet. The pain is nothing compared to the weight of Thuron's body going limp against her. The sanctum's walls peel away like parchment, revealing a sky rent with lightning. The Valor's voices thunder through the rift, not in words, but in force, a chord so vast it bends the earth beneath her knees. The remaining attackers writhe, their stolen flesh sloughing off like rotten fruit, but Alara doesn't watch them die. Her eyes are fixed on Thuron's face, already pale as moonstone. His sacrifice wasn't just for the ritual. It was the final note in a song the shadows never understood. Even the smallest light can cast the longest shadow. The last thing she sees before the world dissolves into white fire is his hand, still curled around the candlestick, as if ready to rise and fight again. Grieving but resolute, Alara kneels beneath the vault of twilight, her hands pressed to the cold earth, as if anchoring herself to the world she's about to rend apart. Above her, Arundel's star flickers not with its usual steadfast glow, but with a pulse like a heartbeat, as though it too feels the weight of what comes next. The ritual words rise from her lips, not in the flowing cadence of elven hymns, but in jagged bursts, each syllable a spark struck from flint. The air thickens, charged with something older than magic, older than prayer. It is the sound of a door creaking open after ages of rust, and what waits on the other side does not knock. It roars. Light erupts from her palms, not the gentle luminescence of Lormaster's lanterns, but a searing column that splits the sky. The ground beneath her trembles, not in fear, but in recognition. This is the touch of the Valor, raw and unfiltered, their power surging through her like a river, breaching its banks. For a heartbeat, it is beautiful. The shadows clinging to the eastern horizon recoil. The twisted creatures that slunk through the sanctuary's halls shriek and dissolve, and the very air shimmers with the scent of rain, soaked blossoms from Valinor's undying gardens. Alara gasps, her spine arching as the energy courses through her, and for one delirious moment, she understands the music of creation in its entirety, every note, every harmony, the way the world was meant to be sung. Then the pain begins. It starts in her fingertips, tiny cracks, spider, webbing across her skin, glowing seams where the mortal flesh can no longer contain the divine. The light pouring from her is no longer clean and golden, but laced with crimson, her blood, burning as it meets the air. She tries to scream, but the sound is swallowed by the wind, now howling in tongues no living throat should replicate. The Valor's presence is not a bomb, it is a wildfire, and she is the kindling. Somewhere beyond the agony, she feels the Manwë's storm-charged breath, Varda's starlit gaze, even Ulmo's distant, sorrowful murmur, but they do not stop. They cannot. The ritual was never a summons, it was a surrender. Her vision fractures into shards of memory, Thuron's last smile, the weight of the fallen Maia's shadow on her wrist, the child singing in Lormaster's courtyard. The images blur, then sharpen, as if the Valor themselves are sifting through her soul, weighing its worth. A voice that is all voices echoes in the hollows of her bones. You called. We answer. The words are neither gentle nor cruel. They are inevitability. The ground beneath her knees blackens, the grass withering to ash in concentric rings. The cracks on her skin spread, creeping up her arms like vines, each one pulsing with a light too bright to look upon. She knows, with a certainty beyond fear, what comes next. The vessel breaks, the flood escapes, and Middle-earth, for all its scars and stubborn hope, will stand naked before the gods it once turned away. Then a shift. A whisper, so soft it might be imagination. The light stutters, and for the first time since the ritual began, the torrent of power hesitates. Something has changed. Something has answered back. The wind stills so completely that Alara can hear her own heartbeat echoing in her ears. Then the air parts like a curtain, and he steps through Manwë, Lord of the Valor, his form not of flesh, but of storm-given shape. His wings stretch wider than the horizon, each feather edged with lightning, yet his eyes hold a gentleness that makes her throat tighten. When he speaks, his voice is the hush before dawn, the moment when the world holds its breath. You have carried our light farther than any mortal, he murmurs, and the words settle over her like a mantle. Now you must choose. Walk with us as a guide to your kin, or return to them as one who has forgotten. The offer hangs between them, vast as the sky. To ascend as a Maia would mean eternity, not as a god, but as a whisper in the wind, a hand steadying the faltering steps of Middle-earth. She would remember everything, the taste of the void, the weight of Thuron's body in her arms, the way the Valor's power had scorched her soul clean. But the second choice, to go back as a mortal with no memory of divine hands or shadowed prophecies, that is the harder gift, that is true surrender. Elara looks down at her own hands, still cracked with fading light. She thinks of the child in Lormaster's courtyard, singing to the sky without knowing why. Of Thuron's candlestick, raised in defiance, of the scholars who transcribed hymns to gods they would never meet. Middle-earth has always been a tapestry of fragile, fleeting things, mortals who love and fight and die without ever glimpsing the loom on which their threads are woven. What right does she have to stand apart from that, to remember what they cannot? Manwë watches her silence, his gaze heavy with centuries. They will stumble without you, he warns, but there's no judgment in it. Only sorrow. Elara smiles then, small and broken. Let them stumble, she whispers. Let them learn to light their own way. The moment the words leave her lips, the cracks in her skin seal over, the glow beneath her flesh dimming like a guttering candle. The last thing she sees before the world goes dark is Manwë's wings folding around her, not in farewell, but in blessing. When she wakes on the sun-warmed stones of Lormaster's courtyard, her hands are empty. The scholars rush to her side, their questions sharp with concern, but all she can recall is a dream of wings and a song she can no longer hum. The child from the courtyard tugs her sleeve, pressing a seashell into her palm. For you, he says, grinning. It sounded like the ocean when I held it close. Alara lifts the shell to her ear. The roar of the tide fills her, wordless and vast, and though she does not know why, her eyes sting with tears. Somewhere beyond the edge of hearing, beyond memory, a wind stirs, carrying not the voices of gods, but the first hesitant notes of a new song. The world will make its own music now. And she will be part of the chorus. The sunlight warms Alara's face as she blinks awake, the blades of grass beneath her fingers damp with dew. For a moment, she lies perfectly still, breathing in the scent of earth and wildflowers, her mind grasping at fragments of something vast and luminous. Wings of storm, a voice like thunder, the weight of a choice she can no longer remember. The memories dissolve like smoke, leaving only a hollow ache behind. She sits up slowly, her hands trembling as they brush the grass. There's no sign of Lormaster's shattered halls, no trace of the golden light that once seared through her veins. Only this field, stretching endlessly under a sky so blue it hurts. A rustling sound draws her attention. A child crouches nearby, plucking dandelions and blowing their seeds into the wind. When he notices her, his eyes widen, not with fear, but curiosity. You fell from the sky, he declares, as if it's the most ordinary thing in the world. Alara opens her mouth to protest, but the words die in her throat. A flicker of movement catches her eye, the dandelion seeds drifting upward instead of down, swirling into a shape too fleeting to name. The child gasps, pointing. See, the wind remembers you. Something tightens in her chest. She doesn't know why the sight makes her want to weep. Rising to her feet, she turns in a slow circle, taking in the rolling hills, the distant sparkle of a river, the smudge of a village on the horizon. It's all so achingly familiar, yet somehow new, as if she's seeing it for the first time, or the last. The child tugs her sleeve, pressing a dandelion into her palm. Make a wish, he insists. She hesitates, then blows. The seeds scatter, and for a heartbeat, they glow. Tiny embers against the blue. The villagers find her at dusk, drawn by the child's excited chatter. They eye her with a mix of wariness and wonder, their whispers painting her as everything from a lost pilgrim to a spirit of the harvest. An elder with hands gnarled as oak roots steps forward, offering bread and salt. You've walked far, she says, though Alara hasn't spoken a word. There's a knowing in the old woman's gaze, a recognition that goes deeper than sight. The world's been waiting for someone to remind it how to sing. That night, as the village gathers around a bonfire, Alara sits apart, watching the flames dance. The hollow ache in her chest hasn't faded, but it's changed, no longer a wound, but a space where something new might grow. A woman strums a lute, the notes hesitant at first, then swelling into a melody that makes the firelight ripple like water. Without thinking, Alara begins to hum along, her voice weaving into the music. The villagers fall silent, their faces turning toward her, and in that moment, she understands. The light of the Valor may be gone, but the song remains, and it doesn't need gods to give it meaning. It needs voices. By the time the embers fade, the children are asleep in their parents' arms, and the night is thick with crickets and starlight. The elder presses a hand to Alara's brow, her touch cool as moonlight. Stay, she murmurs, we've forgotten too much. Alara looks up at the sky, where Eärendil's star flickers, distant but constant. She doesn't remember its name, but she knows somehow that it's been watching over her all along. The choice is simple. She reaches for the lute, her fingers finding the strings as if they've known them forever. The first note rings out, clear and bright, and the wind carries it into the dark. The years pass like pages, turning in an old book, their edges softened by time and touch. Alara's hands, once marked by the scars of forgotten battles, now cradle chalk and parchment as she stands before a room of wide-eyed students. The school she built from sun-baked clay and cedar beams hums with the sound of children's laughter and the scratch of quills. They call her Mistress of Tales, though she doesn't recall when the title first clung to her. It doesn't matter. What matters is the way their faces light up when she speaks of the Valor, of Manwë's winds that once carried prayers to the heavens, of Varda's stars that still whisper secrets to those who listen. She doesn't know why these stories spill so easily from her lips, why the names of the Maiar feel as familiar as her own breath. Sometimes, when the fire in the hearth burns low, she catches herself tracing a faint, silvery scar on her wrist, wondering how it got there. The children press her for answers she can't give. Did you ever meet a Maia? Asks a boy with ink-stained fingers. Alara hesitates, her chest tightening with something like longing or loss. No, she says at last, ruffling his hair, but I think they're closer than we know. The school's walls are lined with drawings of towering figures wreathed in storm and starlight, sketched by hands too small to have ever seen such wonders. Yet the details are uncanny, the curve of Ulmo's waves, the way Nienna's tears are said to bloom into flowers where they fall. When asked how they imagine these things, the children only shrug. "It's like remembering," murmurs one girl, her voice trailing off as if the thought is too fragile to hold. Outside, the world moves on. Kingdoms rise and fall. Wars are fought over borders no one can quite remember drawing. But in this quiet corner, where the apple trees bend under the weight of their fruit, and the well never runs dry, the old stories take root. Elara watches as her students grow, some becoming bards who carry the tales to distant courts, others farmers who hum Yavanna's hymns as they sow their fields. The divine Pantheon slips into the rhythm of everyday life, no longer distant gods, but the warmth in a shared loaf of bread, the steadfastness of a well-loved tool, the courage to face the dark with nothing but a candle and a song. One evening, as the first stars prick the sky, a stranger arrives at the school's gate, an elf, his cloak gray with dust, his eyes older than the hills. He listens from the shadows as Alara tells of the last ship to Valinor, her voice catching on words she doesn't understand. When the children have gone to bed, he approaches, his hand hovering over hers. "You don't recognize me," he says, not as a question, but a quiet ache. She searches his face, finding only a reflection of her own unknowing. "Should I?" The elf exhales, something between a laugh and a sigh. "No," he admits. "Perhaps it's better this way." He leaves before dawn, but not before pressing a shard of crystal into her palm, cold and smooth, with a faint glow at its core. Alara tucks it into the pocket of her apron, where it rests against her skin like a second heartbeat. She never speaks of the visit, but that night, she dreams of a sanctuary by the sea, and a light so bright it could mend the world. Morning comes as it always does. The children arrive with mud on their boots and questions on their tongues. Alara welcomes them, her hands steady, her voice warm. The crystal shard stays hidden, its light a quiet promise. Even the most ordinary hands can carry extraordinary things, and though the names of the Valor fade from her memory by midday, their stories never do. They live in the way her students tilt their heads when they listen, in the way the wind sighs through the rafters, in the way the dandelions still rise when she blows, their seeds catching the light like tiny, wandering stars.